8,000 soldiers surrendered in southern Iraq today. The commander also turned himself in, becoming the first Iraqi division leader to do so.
The Turkish government opened up 2 air corridors today, clearing the way for U.S. aircraft to carry out attacks on Iraq. Soon after, more than 1,000 Turkish troops began crossing the border into northern Iraq. The State Department tells CNN it was not notified beforehand.
And Saddam Hussein says Iraq will treat prisoners of war fairly despite the injustice of the American invasion. Saddam reportedly released a statement that was read by an anchor on Iraqi TV. The statement says Iraq will respect the rights of prisoners because it is, quote, what our religion demands us to do. Well, that's the latest from CNN Headline News. We'll have another update at the bottom of the hour.
In the meantime, you can stay updated on the latest news and weather by checking out our ticker at the bottom of your screen. Now back to CNN's live coverage of the U.S.-led strike against Iraq and Aaron Brown.
Reporting on national security stuff for us. General, I know that you've been jotting down notes. I'll get you in a second. David, you've been standing by for a while, and I'm not sure if you're exactly where you're going to take us. Let me just give you the hanging curve. What do you know?
Well, what I want to talk about is Saddam Hussein and whether he's alive or not and where he might be and what's known about it. And the operating assumption has to be, Aaron, for the men and women that I speak to that work for George Tenet, the Director of Central Intelligence, the operating assumption has to be, for the moment, that he's alive, that he's in charge. But the truth of the matter is, they really don't know.
This time, Iraqi television showed Saddam Hussein with his son Qusay, saying he remains firmly in control. But U.S. officials said the pictures could just as easily be old. Such meetings are a staple of Iraqi TV. U.S. intelligence officials say Saddam could be injured or even dead. Whether or not he's alive, Bush administration officials say his grip on power is slipping.
The regime is starting to lose control of their country. The confusion of Iraqi officials is growing. Their ability to see what is happening on the battlefield, to communicate with their forces, and to control their country is slipping away.
Mr. Secretary, do you believe Saddam Hussein is currently in control of Iraq?
I don't know.
Sources say since the strikes Thursday morning against Saddam Hussein's compound, intelligence headquarters, and a Republican Guard facility, there has been a marked drop in Iraqi leadership communications monitored by U.S. intelligence. Saddam Hussein, a knowledgeable official says, is not communicating orders and can no longer trust anybody. Even deciding where and whether to sleep at night, he said, is a fateful choice for the Iraqi leader. As for the tape released hours after the attack on his compound, in which Saddam mentions the date of the attack, it is Saddam, the White House says. The question is, when?
The tape has been analyzed by the Central Intelligence Agency, and their analysis has led them to believe that the tape is indeed the voice of Saddam Hussein, but no conclusions have been reached about whether it was canned ahead of time or not.
A senior intelligence official tells me that he believes Saddam Hussein was in that compound early Thursday morning, along with at least one of his sons, when the U.S. dropped all those tons of munitions on it. But the official says the U.S. at this point simply doesn't know whether Saddam survived, and if so, whether he's injured. Welcome, the official said, to the fog of war. But I should add, the operating assumption, as I started, the operating assumption has to be that Saddam is still alive. Aaron?
There was this piece of tape that we saw today, and I don't know that this means a single thing, to be perfectly honest, but when you look at the Saddam Hussein in that piece of tape we saw today and the Saddam Hussein we saw in the piece of tape or the video, in any case, that was made the other night in the hours after the attack, that man looks much older, much more tired. I don't want to say afraid. I don't know if he was afraid or not, but markedly different from the way that you normally see this guy, you know, darkened hair. And I mean, that on the left, that is an old man with a graying beard, and usually you see him in a much different, much younger look. He looks much more jowly to us in the left-hand picture. We know we're not questioning whether he is whether it's not Saddam Hussein, I think we know that. I mean, the point's been made. But the stress of that night, if indeed it was taped on that night, certainly shows in the face of a guy who's very concerned about his physical appearance and how he appears to the world.
Absolutely right. He's a man who cares a lot about how he looks, who dyes his hair and wears dapper suits when he can. And on that piece of video, he doesn't look too good at all. He normally is not seen wearing a hat as well. A lot of questions have been raised about the video, but as you heard the White House spokesman say, the CIA has now analyzed it pretty thoroughly. They're convinced it is him, and the only question is, in their minds, is when was it recorded? Is there some possibility that he recorded several tapes, perhaps, so that in the event he was injured or killed, one could be run after his death, or while he's in the hospital but doesn't want people to know it? This is all, all this stuff has been much discussed in the halls of the intelligence community, that is for sure.
And it's been stuff that we all have been munching on as well here, and news organizations have been talking about. At some point we'll know the answer, and we can, all of us will stop speculating on it. Darren Kagan's in Kuwait. When last we saw her, she had literally come up from the basement. The air raid sirens had gone off. It's good to see you well again. You've been out and about some today in the city.
I certainly have. It's morning already here, 7:20 in the morning, Aaron, and good morning from Kuwait City. It's a very windy and chilly morning here in Kuwait City. I already have the morning papers for you. 2 English papers here in Kuwait City, and both paint a different picture, or slightly different picture, of how they're portraying this war. First, let's look at the Kuwait Times. The headline here, Baghdad burns by night. That's the headline, but the picture shows Iraqi soldiers surrendering to American troops. So that's the Kuwaiti Times. Let's take a look now at the Arab Times. Their headline here this morning, very emotional. A-Day rips the heart out of Baghdad, and it shows the assault on Baghdad. And then 2 smaller pictures. I'm not sure if you can tell well. One shows American troops in the field, and the other is a small picture of Iraqi troops surrendering. But on the bottom fold, this is interesting. Down here, Kuwait downs Iraqi missile. Dark dawn of oil fires. 2 interesting notes on that. First, the downed missile. I myself had a chance to go out with the Kuwaiti Air Force yesterday afternoon, early evening. They took me to see this missile out into the Kuwaiti desert. I'd like to show you those pictures and tell you a little bit about it. According to the Kuwaiti Air Force, it is an Al-Fat rocket. It was shot down in the Kuwaiti desert by the Kuwaitis using Patriot missiles. Both the Americans and the Kuwaitis are using Patriot missiles out here. 1 of 10 Iraqi missiles that have been fired on Kuwait at that point. There were no chemical or biological agents on board this. It's like a Frog 7, legal for Iraq to have, but not legal under UN guidelines to shoot at civilian populations. And indeed, this was shot very near a military installation, but it was near a civilian population. The Kuwaiti Air Force asking us not to say more about where that missile landed because they're trying not to give the Iraqis information if they need to aim a little to the left, a little to the right. 12 missiles so far have been fired on Kuwait, and that last one, the last one coming just after 11 p.m. local time last night. There was another siren, much like the one we shared with you yesterday here. It didn't mean going down to the basement here at the hotel, but overall it was a much quieter night here in Kuwait. Just the 1 siren to respond to, Aaron.
I would imagine that the Kuwaiti military was mighty proud of itself for having knocked those missiles out. The Kuwaiti military took pretty severe hit, literally and emotionally, after the invasion, and I suspect they were pretty proud today.
Very proud, and actually this was at this point yesterday, because keep in mind we're 8 hours ahead of where you were, and that I think is why they made it so easy for us to go out there into the desert. They said, basically, meet us on this corner and we will take you out there, and that's exactly what they did. They escorted us right up to that missile. I think, as you said, to point out their work and the impressive work of the Patriot missiles.
And just so that you know, 2 can play the same game on the newspapers, Darren. If you're going to steal my newspaper act, I'm going to have to counter somehow. What camera you want to go to here? This is the Daily Telegraph. This is a terrific, captured in compassion is the headline. And just look at that, pull out just a little bit so you can see the picture. These are American forces who have taken a prisoner. On the one side, you see a Marine, I'm almost certain that's a Marine, giving his prisoner water. And on the other side, I'm not actually sure that that gun is intentionally pointed as opposed to being strapped on the side, but they are holding him and giving him some water. Capture and compassion, the headline. Somewhere along the way, before we leave you tonight or this morning, depending on what part of the country you're in, we should take a look at some of the still photos that have been shot. Those of you who are regular Newsnight viewers know we have, the program has a great affection for still pictures and the power of still pictures. We saw today some absolutely spectacular, gripping, powerful shots that Associated Press photographers in the region had shot, and as we go along and we get some time, we'll try and bring that to you. If Darren is still there, Darren, is the city, is Kuwait a city now that this air attack has been launched? Did they, last night, was that the television viewing, primetime viewing in Kuwait, the air attack on Baghdad, their arch enemy, the much hated enemy across the border 400 so miles away?
It was about 8 p.m. Local time that we saw it here in Kuwait City, so you know that people were gathered around their television sets. Interesting, another item from today's paper, if we can steal your paper act one more time, Aaron. Kuwait, though, actually trying to make an effort to get back to normal. This is the equivalent of Monday morning here, since the weekend is Thursday, Friday. They're encouraging people to go back to work today, but they've given, if you can zoom in here, it's a week's off for women. They're giving the week off for women employees, as long as they're not essential emergency employees, to take the week off if they don't feel comfortable going to work. But what they're really trying to stress here is that more than 100,000 Kuwaiti employees from different governmental sectors will be heading back to work today. They're really trying to test what they call the public authority of civil defense. They want to prove that even in this environment, Kuwait can continue to function. And a question you asked me yesterday about flights, more airlines are starting to fly in and out of here, certainly not at capacity. But once again, Kuwait trying to just be defiant and say it will go on and support American and British troops as they push into Iraq.
We can assure you that that week off for women in Kuwait does not apply to you.
I can assure you it does not as well. Thank you.
Your boss just told me so I know that that's true. Thank you, Darren. We'll be hearing from you a lot still tonight. The next time you'll probably do a whip, and then you'll steal just about everything I have. General Clark, we, as we go along in these conversations, I look over and you're scribbling notes here and there, and we've got a couple of minutes before we do the headlines of the day. What are the thoughts that have made their way onto the index cards?
Well, a couple of things. I was listening to John Burns from the New York Times as he talked about the incredible precision of these strikes. We saw the same thing in the strikes against Belgrade, incidentally. People at first went into the shelters, and then they realized if they weren't near a government building, they weren't going to be struck by this. But, you know, the thing about the precision strikes, they're no better than the intelligence that you have. Right. And someone was asking this afternoon, how long is this going to go on, and how many targets can there be? And we heard Brent Sadler say that as soon as we brought the power into Mosul and Kirkuk, we'd probably run them out. Well, we're not going to be able to conduct those strikes unless we've got the intelligence we need on where the Iraqi facilities in there are.
And just going back to Afghanistan, the battle in Afghanistan seemed to turn when American spotters, Special Forces spotters got in there so they could direct or get the intelligence back. You need to hit this coordinate or that coordinate, right?
That's exactly right. The precision works great when you're dealing with an identifiable military target, like an enemy unit on the ground. When you're going after government buildings, and after you've identified the buildings associated with X number of ministries, which seem like they have something to do with Saddam Hussein's regime, and you've gone out to the known command posts, then that's where you need the boots on the ground and the guys who can really tell you what's going on in there. And hopefully we'll have that, because that's very important to keep up the tempo of the pressure against this regime.
You know, you see these old, just 20 seconds or so, you see these old World War II movies where
You're watching our continuous coverage of the strike on Iraq here on Headline News. Hello, everyone. I'm Rudy Bakhtiar.
And I'm Michael Lanos. We will bring you back to CNN's coverage in just a few minutes. That's after we take a quick look at some of the other stories making news. First, though, here are the latest war developments.
Explosions shook the Iraqi capital in the early morning hours. Government buildings in and around Baghdad were devastated when the U.S.-led air campaign intensified. Among the sites struck was the city of Tikrit, which is Saddam Hussein's ancestral home.
Iraq's 51st Division has surrendered to U.S. forces in southern Iraq. The Pentagon calls it the most significant surrender so far. Up to 8,000 to 10,000 troops could have given up.
And people in the southern city of Safwan greeted coalition forces with handshakes and gratitude. One villager even pounded a poster of Saddam Hussein with his shoe while a soldier tore it down.
And groups of specially trained firefighters are traveling with the Marines. They're trying to contain oil refinery fires. British officials say retreating Iraqi soldiers have torched as many as 30 oil wells in southern Iraq.
Well, the sun has come up in Baghdad. You're looking at a live picture from the Iraqi capital, where it is now 7:30 in the morning and where it is unclear how many more strikes are planned there. Here in the U.S., demonstrators took to the streets all across the country to express their views on both sides of the war debate. In Chicago, hundreds of anti-war protesters surrounding the federal building. Police in riot gear had to be called in to calm the crowds after some demonstrators laid in the street and blocked traffic. No arrests were made. Meanwhile, demonstrators in Memphis, Texas gathered to show their support for the troops. They say Iraqi citizens should have the benefit of living in a free country like America. Support the troops rallies are planned for tomorrow in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it's Sunday in Richmond, Virginia.
A 9/11 suspect says top al-Qaeda detainees can help clear his name. In a court motion unsealed today, Zakaria Moussaoui requested Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and an al-Qaeda operative be allowed to testify on his behalf. The government is denying access to terrorism suspects and doesn't want them to testify in open court. Moussaoui is the only person to be charged for the 9/11 attacks, but during interrogations, Mohammed told investigators that Moussaoui was really preparing to take part in a separate attack. The World Health Organization is announcing what they call a major step forward in developing a diagnostic test for the mystery pneumonia that appears to have originated in Asia. The CDC says it is now investigating 22 suspected cases in the U.S. At least in some cases, the patients appear to have been infected while in the U.S. and not abroad. So far, there are more than 300 reported cases in 14 other countries, including 10 deaths.
And the world's fourth largest airline is blaming the war for a massive round of job cuts. Northwest Airlines has announced it's laying off close to 5,000 employees and cutting 12% of its flights. The carrier says it doesn't have enough passengers to keep its current payroll and flight schedule. Other airlines have also announced cuts this week.
Well, the latest military developments kicked investors into overdrive today. The Dow Jones Industrials gained 235 points to 85.21. For the week, the Dow jumped 662 points. That's the best weekly performance for blue chips since October 1982. The NASDAQ Composite rose 19 points for the day. The S&P gained 20.
Well, even with the war in Iraq, the sports world is playing on.
And Steve Overmeyer's here with an update from the NCAA.
If you look in the foreground there is a building there which is associated with a Ministry of Planning. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what is going on beside it as we look at some satellite images in just a moment. But this bombing was very sustained and very precise. This big, wide swath of Baghdad is all considered part of a presidential palace compound, the Republican Palace, right at the center of it. Let's take you a little bit further down the street here, or up north, actually, as we're headed to the northwest, really, to the Ministry of Information. The reason I show you that is where the camera is located that you've been seeing all these pictures from. Satellite dishes on the roof there, and the camera shooting in this direction. Let's swing around, show you exactly what you were looking at. And as we swing around, we'll try to match up this view with some of the pictures you've been seeing and give you a sense of what's going on and exactly what was destroyed based on what we've heard as you look at live pictures now as dawn breaks over Baghdad. There's those pictures you see. There's that building in the foreground. Come back to the satellite image, and I'll show you where that building is as we move a little bit closer to that area. That building is off in this direction here. And those palaces, all that activity was right in there. Let's move along and go to that area. We'll show you the palace that was involved in that tremendous explosion there. Just one of several that was the target here. Once again, these palaces, bit of a euphemism. These are really complexes which involve all manner of regime control. The Republican Palace, that main central palace here, right on the banks of the Tigris River. Another one that was struck, we know for sure, on the course of this 1,000 cruise missile attack, the palace that is known as Al-Sajud. Al-Sajud is a little further down the Tigris River. And then finally, the palace known as Al-Salam, which translated is the Peace Palace. We'll show you quickly some of the pictures released by Iraqi TV of the remnants of what is the Peace Palace, the Al-Salam. These pictures released shortly after that barrage of bombs which rained down on Baghdad. Go back to the satellite image and you'll see the before. There was your after. And that is exactly what has been going on. These regime targets, these focuses of Saddam Hussein's, well, his desire to build monuments to himself, much of that today lies in rubble. Aaron?
Miles, thank you. That's, and we assume, I think correctly, that the level of sophistication of the satellite imagery that the American military will be working at is a bit more precise than what we just put on the air. And what we just put on the air, the computer enhancement there, is pretty interesting stuff. We have, I think generally people are aware, we showed earlier around 10 o'clock or I think 10 o'clock Eastern, some of the demonstrations that had gone on in Chicago. Obviously there's enormous concern around the world about the breakdown of diplomacy and the beginning of the war. This is particularly true in Arab capitals. One of the things that we ought to look at and pay attention to is how the world is reacting to the American attack on Iraq, which is now a couple of days old. So here is a quick survey, if you will, of world reaction today, on the streets at least, to what has gone on. Today around the world, the anti-war protests seem to grow larger and increasingly more violent. Fighting broke out in the streets of Cairo, rocks thrown at riot police, water cannons used to disperse tens of thousands of protesters. In Bahrain, police used tear gas to push back anti-war demonstrators, marchers shouting for U.S. troops to get out of their country. The Fifth Fleet is based there. For Arab leaders in the region, war has caused them to walk a most delicate diplomatic line.
We will work with all possible means to bring a stop to this war as soon as possible in order to ease the suffering of our brothers in Iraq.
Not all of the protests were abroad. Protests in San Francisco threatened to shut down the city, or parts of it, for the second day in a row, as anti-war activists sat in the street. Hundreds have been arrested. But there was also this today. The people of Mobile, Alabama, standing in support of American troops at war.
We're supporting our nation.
Not all protests are large. Sometimes they are as simple as one lone man in a Midwestern town. Morgan Richardson today. The town was Austin, Minnesota. Which, if I remember much from, and I don't remember much, honestly, from my high school geography, Austin is to the south of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. This has happened now a couple of nights in a row to us where we're able to, we do what many of you do, to be honest. We check the internet, see what other people are reporting. You've got literally thousands of people, reporters around the world, who are working on this story, on one strain of the story or another. You have the embeds in country. You have a lot of people in Washington, in Arab capitals, in European capitals, all trying to develop different storylines that ultimately someday will give us the full picture of what has gone on. That's how you build it. I mean, each of these little pictures, literally you have the picture of Baghdad looking south, and a picture of northern Iraq, and a picture here and a picture there, and then you add all the diplomatic pictures, and you add all the governmental pictures, what's going on in the White House, and ultimately, but ultimately takes a while, you get the full picture of what's going on. Tomorrow's, Saturday's Washington Post will report that havens are being offered to defectors, an intensified effort to divide Iraqi President Saddam Hussein from his inner circle. U.S. military intelligence officers have communicated with some Iraqi commanders, according to the Post, and secretly designated buildings in the capital for defectors to occupy, promising that they will not be targeted in the American air campaign, senior U.S. officials said yesterday. That's the lead to a story in the Washington Post for Saturday. One of the reasons we love having General Clark with us is because of his military background. He often sees things, not simply in military things, but more broadly that we might otherwise miss, or has interpretations that we don't necessarily see, and our guys don't necessarily see, our men and women. When you read this, you saw a couple of things, didn't you?
Well, I got a little bit concerned because the way to end this war quickly is not only the bombing, but it's the relentlessness of American purpose. And there were a couple of phrases in this article that made me think we may be trying too hard to reach the Iraqis. We don't want to be the suitors in this. We want them to come to us seeking a means of escape. Please get us out of this terrible fix we're in. Not coming to them and saying, we really hate to do this to you, we got all these bombs, we really don't want to use them, so please, won't you, we'll give you these buildings. And you can't see from just reading the story where the balance is, but there is a balance in this type of psychological pressure and using military force simultaneous with diplomacy.
So I'm going to try and force you to be a little more direct here. We were looking at a specific line in the story which reads, there are lots of people all trying to give the Iraqi commanders option and ways to end the resistance. And your reaction when you read that was that there might be a sense that the Americans are so desperate to end this before that they're not really as strong, and maybe if you're an Iraqi, maybe we can beat these guys. Maybe they will give in because they don't really want to fight it. What they want to do is see if we'll give up, and if we don't, they may fold like a cheap suitcase.
That would be the concern, that sentence.
No one's suggesting that's what's happening. It's just, I think what you're saying is that might be running through the minds of an Iraqi.
You're watching continuous coverage of the strike on Iraq here on CNN Headline News. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rudy Bakhtiar.
And I'm Michael Lanos. We will rejoin CNN in just a few minutes, but first let's recap the latest developments of the war.
Explosions were heard in the Iraqi capital about 2 hours ago. It was just before daybreak in Baghdad. Earlier, government buildings in and around the city were devastated when the U.S.-led air campaign intensified. Among the cities hit was Tikrit, which is Saddam Hussein's ancestral home.
Iraq's 51st Division has surrendered to U.S. forces in southern Iraq. The Pentagon calls it the most significant surrender so far. It's estimated up to 8,000 to 10,000 troops have given up.
Iraqi television broadcast video today of Saddam Hussein meeting with his son. It was not clear when the video was taken. U.S. officials say Saddam may be losing control of his government.
And the curtain will rise on the Oscars, but this year's show will be toned down because of the war. A handful of stars have decided not to attend Sunday's ceremony.
And that's the latest from CNN Headline News. Stay tuned for updates from Sachi Koto.
In the meantime, you can stay updated on the latest news and weather by checking out our ticker at the bottom of your screen. Now back to Aaron Brown and CNN's live coverage of the U.S.-led strike against Iraq.
They have, if you were with us last night, you know this, it was an extraordinary thing to witness. This is a remarkably clear picture. When these video phones stop down, I assume this is video phone, isn't it? Video phones stop, when the movement stops, the picture clears a whole lot. But you see they've made their way about 100 miles inside of Iraq. They came from Kuwait. They crossed this berm without much difficulty. And last night, for 4 hours or so, it felt as if we were riding with them. which reminds me, if I may, it just is of something else, one other piece of business from last night I want to take a minute and talk about. Again, those of you who were with us last night, there was a moment where, you know, I'd like to tell you we're really smart. We plan all this stuff, and it's not how it happened. But the fact is that a woman up in upstate New York has a son who's in this unit, and she happened to be watching. She's watching her son, and they were pretty grainy pictures yesterday, but she's watching her son, and she doesn't see him, but she knows that's the unit, making their way across the desert, and she feels, as you would feel if it was your son, a lot of anxiety and tremendous pride, both of those things, and she sent us a most lovely email, and we read it on the air. Basically, she talked about how proud she was, and she thanked us, and there was no reason to thank us, but we certainly understood her pride. And this afternoon, I called her up to thank her for her email, and honestly to say I hope that in reading it, I didn't embarrass her. People don't necessarily send their emails to us to have them read on the air. And we started to talk about her son. And she said, when he left, her name is Rosemary. Rosemary said to him, Kevin, I'm very much afraid. This is the first time in my life I feel like I can't protect you. And Kevin said to her, Mom, my turn to protect you. When I read her email on the air last night, this hadn't happened to me very often in my life in this business, I could feel it in my throat. I think we all felt the emotion of that moment. And when I talked to her this afternoon and she described her son saying, Mom, it's my turn to protect you, it happened again. Her little boy had grown up. We hope Kevin is out there safely, and all of his Army colleagues are out there safely tonight. They've had an extraordinary couple of days making their way, and thankfully they, after meeting a little resistance at the very beginning, on the left side of the screen, by the way, I'll get to this in a second, it's the 101st. We've got a correspondent there, and we'll talk a bit about that. But we spent so much time with the cab yesterday, live, Walt Rogers reporting, and we'll hear from Walt, I hope, before the night's over. But anyway, they probably are just stopped down generally. Do you think they're just doing another refuel, or have they stopped at their place? Have they stopped where they're going to stop? No, they're making their way to Baghdad.
It would be a guess, but they must be somewhere near the river, because I see greenery behind them. So they're out of the desert somewhere near the Euphrates.
Okay, and we don't want to be any more specific than that. As you move to the north, what happens is the desert changes, and you get a little more green. And you see none of this green when you're in Kuwait, but as you get into a little deeper into the southern part of Iraq, you start to see some greenery even in the south, and we want to always be careful, and we try always to be careful about giving too much detail on this, but it's a big desert out there, and anyway, it's good to see those guys. I think we all felt, I know I got a lot of notes from viewers, we all felt like we got to know them in a kind of crazy way. Even as we didn't see them, we saw them racing across the desert, and we saw them going past Bedouin tents and herds of goats and wildflowers that were coming up from the desert. And Walt Rogers' stunning descriptions last night of that ride, that bumpy, noisy, not very comfortable ride. We saw them trying to eat their breakfast and refueling. There's some helicopters that do reconnaissance for them. Those of you who were along for the ride last night, I think it is one of those television nights you won't forget. And what made it perfect is that there was no hostile fire, there was no war in front of us. We didn't have to report the worst of the detail of war, but we could just marvel at this combination of cooperation, technology, and just really good journalism that was going on. And we see it again out in the desert, American soldiers walking around their vehicles, and behind them there'll be an infantry division that will move at some point, if it has not started already. We saw a moment ago a picture of the 101st, and we do have a correspondent also embedded in that fabled group of soldiers. we don't quite have contact with Ryan Shilcolt. That's a picture of Ryan, who's done some terrific work for us as well, and hopefully we'll get all of those problems, the audio problems, solved. I think all of you certainly understand the complexity of trying to put live television pictures on from the middle of nowhere. And the middle of nowhere is pretty much what you're looking at out there. In general, we spent a long time with these guys last night. We were both so tired when it was over. We didn't talk much. It was a heck of a ride, though, wasn't it?
They really galloped across the ground there and fulfilled their mission. According to the press that'll be published tomorrow morning, Aaron, this infantry division has raced unopposed across a wide swath of Iraqi desert, and they're on the edge of the Euphrates Valley as of last night in Iraq, and spread out somewhere in central Iraq.
Now, have these guys, just because we did spend so much time with them, have they slept at all?
Hopefully they've given them time, and maybe that's what they've done here. This is early morning in Iraq. Maybe they pulled into this position after dark last night and gave them a chance to look at the vehicles, make sure the weapons are clean, and rest, because there are liable to be some tough days ahead. And even though this is different than carrying 70 pounds on your back and walking, this is still very, very strenuous operations. Even if you're in that vehicle, you're being bounced and jostled all day. You're carrying a lot of gear, and you're under continuous stress, and you get a lot of uninterrupted sleep. So the chance to get 6 hours flat on your back in relative safety, boy, I hope they got it.
I hope they did too. I just want to make this point again, and I hope it doesn't sound defensive, because in no sense do I mean it that way. We are always extremely vague about where any particular unit is, for obvious reasons. And this is, I suppose in this day and age, Iraqi intelligence can throw a satellite dish up like many of you have on your home and watch all the American television networks. But CNN, as you know, really is, in moments like this, the world's television network. And bad guys, in this case in Iraq, sit and watch us. And what we want to be extremely careful of is that we don't say anything that endangers any of those young men you see in front of you. Now, in truth, I feel a whole lot more confident about how I do this and how we do this when you have the former Supreme NATO commander sitting next to you, because he has an exquisite sense of both what we can say safely and what we ought not to say safely. And I know, and I understand, I think we all understand why you get concerned about this. We are as concerned as you. None of us wants on our shoulders ever, either for any reason, accidental, competitive, any of those crazy reasons you can think of, to have said anything or done anything that endangered the lives of any of those young men. And so we are pretty careful. We're not pretty careful. We're very careful. Even before the embed rules were put into place with this agreement with the Pentagon, here at CNN, and I'm sure this is true at other news organizations, internal rules about talking about troop movements and all the rest. For someone who didn't want to sound defensive, I've certainly prattled on a long time about this. Trust me, we think about it all the time. Walt Rogers is out there. Walt, have you, well...
Can I finish
please,
on that?
Go ahead.
Because, you know, I did say there's a river there, but it's impossible to go north out of Kuwait without, at some point, running into that river. It's a very long river, and saying that river's name really doesn't identify the location of the unit in any targetable sense.
This came up just at one point last night, and the general pointed out it's a big darn desert out there. The fact that we know they're in the desert doesn't tell the Iraqis a whole lot.
That's exactly right.
Right.
No, their security is maintained.
Okay. Ryan Shilcolt, as we said, is with the 101st. We also spent some time with them last night. They were, as we looked at it, getting ready to move out. Ryan, have they in fact moved out now?
Yeah, Aaron, I can report that the 101st Airborne 3rd Brigade is now well inside Iraq. I'm actually with them, been embedded with the 101st ever since we left Fort Campbell. And for these soldiers, this is a pretty significant moment now well inside Iraq. Aaron?
And how does the order, just describe a bit how it comes about that they move out? Does was there a pep talk? What happened?
Well, first of all, it was in the cover of night. The convoy moved out of Kuwait. Pretty long convoy. There was not any immediate pep talk before. We had been in what was called an assembly area for some time. The pep talks for the troops had taken place a long time before that. It was pretty much a very organized, orchestrated event, a lot of vehicles involved, sort of like being in one big traffic jam, if you will. And there were a lot of stops where they would let convoys in front get farther forward and then move this convoy forward. So it was kind of like being in a traffic jam, but only all the vehicles belong to the military.
Was it, I want to get to Walt Rogers, who's up on the top screen. Brian, just to stay with me for another minute. Was it quiet? Did the guys cheer? Did they, just as much sense of the moment as you can?
Absolutely. You know, a lot of the soldiers actually did take pictures as they came across the border. I'm not sure that they were supposed to do that. Obviously, the Army likes to enforce what they call light discipline. In other words, they encourage the soldiers, really try and make the soldiers not use white light. But I must have seen at least 5 soldiers pop out of their vehicles and take pictures as they cross the border. But this is really the beginning. I mean, a lot of these soldiers really wanted, not that they really want to go to war in Iraq, but sitting in Kuwait, they were waiting for some kind of resolution. They either wanted to go home or they wanted this to get started, because the way they look at it, the sooner it started, the sooner it can be finished, and the sooner they can go home. So for moving into Iraq for a lot of these troops was really quite a pleasant and reassuring, actually, thing.
It's become a motto, as you know far better than we do, of a lot of these units, a lot of the sergeants and the young officers, to say to homesick young men who would want to get home. The road home goes through Baghdad. It must have been, at least to some degree, a relief to know that they are on their way, that it's underway.
Yeah, and the feeling 101st, I noticed when we passed through the border, there was a sign that said in English, "Welcome to Iraq," and it had been left there by soldiers from the 3rd Infantry Division. So obviously this is a feeling that's shared by all the soldiers. They really wanted to, A, move into Iraq, and B, note that they had made that move. This is an important thing for them.
Now, let me ask you to do something I asked you to do again. Just step out of the way, and so we can get a view of this long,
sure.
Thank you, this long line of military vehicles of all sorts. This is the 101st. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, correct, General?
Correct.
I know that a lot of people, as I looked at the mail today, a lot of people down there saw them yesterday as they were strapping on their helmets and getting ready to roll, as it were, and there must have been some relief. I know it was a relief to them. Again, this is just out there in the desert, thousands of miles from where we are in Atlanta, and you see this convoy, supplies. This is our infantrymen. No, this is an airborne unit, I apologize. They'll be moved around, and we also, up at the top of your screen, out in the desert as well, have the cab is out there, and Walt Rogers is with them. Walt, are you able to hear me?
Yes, Aaron, I hear you very well. The camera at this moment is pointing out on a fairly tight focus over a field in south central Iraq. What you're looking at is 3 armored vehicles. Each of those armored vehicles has a 120 millimeter mortar on board, and each of those mortars is ready to fire. It's believed that somewhere not too far in the distance, off the back end of those vehicles, there is an Iraqi detachment of unknown size, the 7th Cavalry, 3rd Squadron, U.S. Army 7th Cavalry has been out scouting since at least midnight, and we are now along a road, again, headed north towards Baghdad, but most of these tanks, the mortar battalion that you see over there, almost everyone is in a firing position. A short while ago, we saw the helicopters doing a reconnaissance of this entire area. There you can see the main battle tanks. You can also see one of the vital ingredients of war, mud. It's raining here. You can see the soldiers all wandering over the tops of their turrets, and what you're looking at is tanks ready to fire if the order goes forward. Again, we have to be very vague and cautious about what our objective is and where we are here in Iraq, but we need to but the best we can tell you is we're in south central Iraq. This is, again, the Apache troop of the 3rd Squadron, U.S. Army 7th Cavalry. They continue to push forward towards Baghdad. You can see the 120 millimeter guns pointing upward and outward. It is believed in the direction of those guns, not too far in the distance, there is an Iraqi unit of an undetermined size. There is some hope that when this 7th Cavalry encounters the Iraqi army units that they will surrender. We saw many people standing beside the road as we were rolling to this position. Iraqis, mostly peasant farmers, standing out there, many of them waving quite joyously, some waving scarves, others waving white flags. There were whole families atop mud huts waving white flags. Most of them were smiling. Again, the objective of this army is nothing more than a regime change in Baghdad. And so I think most of the Iraqi citizens here have a pretty good idea. They have nothing to fear from the cavalry or the 3rd Infantry Division, which is following it. Almost every Iraqi who's aware of anything is now fully aware that this army is moving towards Baghdad. And as I say, there's nothing to fear from it if you're an Iraqi farmer out here in central Iraq. Aaron?
This is the people that you have likely encountered are the Shias of Iraq, one of the religious groups, and this is a group that has no particular love for the government of Saddam Hussein. Obviously, there are people in Iraq who do support the government, but this group, the Shias, would not be among them. The 101st, up on the top of your screen, why don't we, if we can, there you go, has started to move again. Ryan, I don't know if you're still able to communicate with us or not, are you?
I am, Aaron. In fact, I don't have very much time. I don't want to miss my ride. What I wanted to tell you was a little bit about the 101st and these vehicles you are seeing. The 101st Airborne is actually called the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, and ever since the days when they jumped into Normandy from planes, ever since about Vietnam, they've specialized in moving their troops by helicopters. You don't see any helicopters here, but I would caution you to not think that you won't see any helicopters in this conflict. The 101st Airborne has more helicopters than any other division in the U.S. Army. What you're seeing now is basically armored vehicles, some 5-ton trucks, and some armored Humvees with anti-tank systems on top of them. This is how, should the 101st Airborne need to move on the ground, this is how they move. They don't have the same kind of mechanized stuff like the soldiers that Walt is with. They do not have tanks. They do not have Bradley fighting vehicles. Very much a grunt, if you will, an infantry division. Most of what these guys do is hump 100-plus pound backpacks on their backs. So that's what you can expect to see from them. A little bit about where we are. I cannot tell you a little bit about the environment. This is a very friendly setting. There are some Iraqis moving around in what look like 5-ton trucks. I'm told they are Bedouins also here. They are very friendly. They've been driving by. As they drive by the U.S. troops, they've been waving, the U.S. troops waving back. Really quite a friendly environment so far for the U.S.'s 101st Airborne. Aaron?
Ryan, terrific work. Jump in your vehicle. As you said, you don't want to miss your ride. You're on the story of a lifetime, and we don't want you to miss your ride either, because we don't want to have to explain it here. Thank you, buddy. Ryan Chilcote's with the 100. I'm going to go to Walt in a second. This is one of those questions that we ask because we suspect it comes up. If they're an airborne unit, why are they driving in the desert, General?
Well, this is actually an air assault unit. It used to be an airborne division, and we kept the name for part of the heritage we talked about last night. It's got a great, glorious heritage, but actually it's not jump qualified right now. It goes in with air assault on helicopters. And so they're repositioning on the ground. They're going to move on the ground as far as they can, use the helicopters when they need to make that combat assault in there.
Okay, so at one point they were something, and we talked, for those of you.
You're watching continuous coverage of the strike on Iraq on CNN Headline News. I'm Sachi Koto. We'll take you back to CNN's live coverage in just a few minutes after a quick recap of the situation. Coalition forces are hoping to instill shock and awe in the Iraqi leadership with a massive aerial assault. Defense officials say about 1,500 bombs are expected to fall on Iraq by Saturday afternoon. Several government buildings, including the Republican Palace, have already been destroyed. An entire Iraqi regular army division, including the commander, turned themselves over to U.S. forces in southern Iraq Friday. There could be up to 10,000 soldiers in the division. Iraqi expatriates have been working with the CIA to help negotiate similar peaceful surrenders. And U.S. planes can now use Turkish airspace for attacks on Iraq. The Turkish government opened 2 air corridors Friday, soon after a CNN correspondent reported that more than 1,000 Turkish troops began crossing the border into northern Iraq. Massive anti-war protests in cities across the U.S. continued Friday, including San Francisco, New York, Washington, and Chicago, where thousands of demonstrators took to the streets for an evening march. Hundreds of police in riot gear lined the procession. Reportedly, there were no arrests or incidents of violence. However, more than 600 people were arrested during Chicago protests Thursday and Friday. Demonstrators in Memphis, Texas, gathered to show their support for the troops. Similar rallies are planned for Saturday in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Sunday in Richmond, Virginia. That's a quick update from CNN Headline News. You can get the latest news and weather anytime by checking out our ticker at the bottom of your screen. Now back to CNN's live coverage of the U.S.-led strike against Iraq.
There is the possibility that whatever Iraqi units are out there might surrender. Of course, that would be the wish of this cavalry unit because, again, the cavalry is not there to go head-to-head. It is out there to scout and pave the way for the 3rd Infantry Division, which will follow. And again, if they have to engage, they've got more than enough firepower to engage a unit 4 times their size. So engagement isn't an issue. It's just not the goal of this unit. The goal of this unit is reconnaissance to find the fastest, safest way north to Baghdad, and that mission is being performed now. The difficulty, of course, is that the 7th Cavalry may have to fix the Iraqi detachment which is out there, and by fix it, that means hold it, engage it if necessary. Their operating rules are that if it wants to surrender, that's fine. If it shows the least bit of hostility, it will be annihilated. But again, that's not the position of this army. It's not the mission of the cavalry at this point. They're merely trying to punch forward as quickly as possible to Baghdad. Aaron?
Walter, I know we're going to lose you a little bit to one of the other CNN networks. I will tell you that the pictures you're sending back are, I don't know if you can see them, they're absolutely spectacular. When you pulled the video phone off the shelf, you got the good one, I'll tell you that. When's the last time you slept? When's the last time these guys slept?
I was talking to a soldier aboard a Bradley armored vehicle a few moments ago, and none of us has slept for over 60 hours, and no one slept in a horizontal position in at least that long. They have actually more space cramped up in the tanks than the CNN crew has in its Humvee. The reason being, we're just crammed full with electronic equipment, and I find myself sitting upright almost in a prenatal position. collision, awake or asleep, and there isn't much sleep. So really, there's been no horizontal sleep of any sort for 60 hours, and no one's had anything to eat except a meal on the run. That being the case, I can tell you everyone's adrenaline is pumping this morning. You know, when you smell an engagement coming, a soldier, just no matter how fatigued he may be, loses all consciousness of fatigue, takes his sights. One of the most interesting sounds we've heard around here all morning is the clearing of the machine guns atop the tanks. You can hear them readying themselves for action, clearing the machine guns. You can hear that metallic clacking of the bolt sliding back. Very same thing with the M16 rifles. Of course, you don't have to clear a tank gun to do it, but this unit, the 3rd Squadron 7th Cavalry, U.S. Army, could see an engagement in the not-too-distant future. There's every bit of evidence that there is an Iraqi detachment out there. The only question is, does it want to stand and fight? And as you pointed out a short while ago, that isn't all that likely. It could happen. I probably shouldn't speculate, but the units in southern Iraq, south-central Iraq, tend to be Shia units, that is to made up, composed of Shiite Muslims, and they have no great love nor loyalty to Saddam Hussein because he's butchered the Shia Muslims in the past. Saddam's greatest core of strength lies with the Sunnis. The Sunni Muslims, they are, of course, in Baghdad, and, of course, his own family up in Tikrit. Aaron?
Walter, I know that you need to do some business with CNN International, and I want to let you do that, but come back and talk to us again when you're done with that. General...
my heart's with those troops out there.
Yeah.
They are... you know, they've raced hard, they've worked hard, they've maintained their equipment, they went through the dust, they went through the dirt. Now it's raining, now there's mud, and they're facing the imminence of contact. This is what all the training's been about. This is what all the prayers have been about.
These guys haven't, as Walt said, haven't hardly slept in 60 hours. I assume that the military has done a fair amount of research on what the minimum amount of sleep you need to get before. CNN ought to do it too. The minimum amount of sleep that you need before you start becoming completely ineffective.
We've done a lot on that, as a matter of fact. But you know, what it shows is that you can catnap, especially young men like this can catnap, and they'll come back for a certain period of time, and they'll be very, very alert. And they have been catnapping, I'm sure, to some extent. And with the adrenaline and with the rush of this thing, for a brief engagement, they'll be fully ready to go.
I mean, it is, and as I was asked by, I gave an interview today, somebody asked me if I missed being out there, and I said, well, I've been out there in those situations, and honestly, it's young man's work. It's very hard work. Walt is at least my age, maybe a year or two older, mid-50s, a little older than that, and he has been doing yeoman's work out there. Again, I don't, at the risk of sounding like I'm patting our guys on the back endlessly, I don't, well, in this case I am. The guy has been stunning in his reporting. It's tough duty, and we appreciate mightily what the work he's done and also the work that his crew has done. Let me show, I want to go to Darren Kagan for a quick update. I want to show you one headline before we go, because she's probably going to do this anyway. This is the Times Herald Record in upstate New York, a front page on a Saturday morning. Let me do it over there. There we go. All pictures. I'll hold it up a little bit. These are AP photos. Rain of Fire is the headline. This is up in the Catskills region of New York State, and that's what will land on the doorstep of the folks up there with the headline Rain of Fire. Darren Kagan in Kuwait City. Give us the headlines of where a busy day has been. It's 12:16 Eastern Time.
And I am Darren Kagan in a windy Kuwait City. Aaron Brown will have more ongoing coverage of the strike on Iraq. But first, here is what we know at this hour. As U.S. troops continue to advance, virtually unopposed U.S. and allied forces reported seizing 2 strategically important airfields in the west near the Jordanian border. In the southeast, invading soldiers suffered 2 fatalities as they seized Iraqi oil wells and secured control of the Fa Peninsula on Iraq's coast. For the most part, the so-called wave of steel rolling across the Iraqi desert reports virtually no resistance. Thousands of Iraqi soldiers have surrendered without firing a shot. At last report, the invasion force was almost halfway to Baghdad. And the Iraqi capital woke up to a familiar sound this morning. Those are air raid sirens that came after a night of ferocious bombing. The U.S. says the so-called shock and awe campaign will continue until tomorrow night Baghdad time. When it's over, the U.S. expects to have hit Baghdad and 3 other cities with about 1,500 rockets and missiles. Oil fires have been reported by advancing U.S. troops moving through Iraq's southern oil fields. The Iraqi government denies torching its own wells. They said they ignited oil-filled trenches as a defensive measure. U.S. officials had warned that Iraq might torch its oil wells, but other fears have not come to pass. As far as we know so far, there have been no Iraqi terrorism, no missiles launched at Israel, and no apparent use of human shields as military targets. And no destruction of dams, no use of biochemical weapons, either against invading forces or against the Iraqi Kurds. Our continuing coverage of the strike on Iraq with Aaron Brown continues right now.
Certainly does. Darren, thank you. Darren Kagan in Kuwait. It's been quiet there. It was not so quiet last time. We were talking to Darren at one point last night, the air raid sirens, we heard them go off. She scampered down to the basement, to the shelter there, and then a short time later, we heard the all clear. They came up. It's been, as Darren reported, she went out and looked at some of the damage. I'll show you some of those pictures later, but came back up and went back to work. It's tough duty also to have your sleep interrupted 3, 4, 5, 6 times a night by these air raid sirens. The embedding process, putting reporters in with these units, Walt Rogers, Ryan Chilcote, you've heard from just the last 20, we just...
5 hospitals, and there might be other casualties which has not been accounted for. These villains and gangs claim that they only targeted military installation. We'll show you and we'll show the international media these so-called military targets in hospitals. Now, talking about the first point is, which I would like to tell you, as far as the various fronts, you may have heard from some of the media which do not say the truth, especially those who belong to the villains and the gangsters, those who are supportive of the Zionists. As far as Al-Fao Peninsula is concerned, yesterday, and under heavy bombardment, the defense minister, he spoke to you, and you must have seen him, and he gave an accurate picture to the different fronts, and he said that what was the military position at the time and how they failed to advance. The situation in Qasr so far, the Iraqi forces are in their positions, and there has been heavy fighting, and they have lost, they have incurred many losses, and they haven't been able to advance or achieve a breakthrough through our defenses in Qasr. In Al-Fao Peninsula, the British have been lying about the situation there. Our forces are still there, the fighting is continuing and it is very intensive. They have taken some civilians. Those cowards are desperate to show any achievement. They have hijacked some civilians from Al-Fao. Those mercenaries kidnapped civilians from Al-Fao Peninsula so they can claim that they have captured Iraqi soldiers. But it shows how desperate they are. They want to show a word that they don't respect to their own taxpayers, so they hoping to mislead their own people because we are going to draw them into this swamp. Therefore, all they can do is lie and continue lying. As for their columns near Al-Nasiriyah, to the south of Al-Nasiriyah, they have a column there which is being resisted as we speak, and hopefully it will be destroyed. A small column had advanced to the Souq al-Shuyukh, which has been surrounded by the tribes there. Another column is advanced during to Al-Batha, which is a small town, and has been rebuffed by fighters from the Al-Ba'ath party and the tribes. A few hours ago, 5 tanks belonging to the invaders have been destroyed and they are still on fire. I've spoken to the Iraqi press agency person there, and the fighting is continuing, and God willing we will destroy this column. They have another column that is going towards the Ali bin Abi Talib base, the south of Nasiriyah. They were faced with heavy fire and retreated without achieving anything. This is the position until about an hour ago, and it's not as they claim. As for their cowardly assault on the capital Baghdad last night and this morning until dawn, of course, they said that they launched over 300 missiles. We have calculated in a small area of Baghdad that 19 missiles fell on that particular area. At dawn, I went there and I saw parts of these missiles. 19 missiles in a very small area. Therefore, I expect tens of missiles that have been shot down by the Iraqi air defenses, and we are calculating all these missiles. This gang of villains, international villains. Yesterday, the Defense Secretary Rumsfeld and his hopeless General Myers talking about their precision bombing and how that no one should compare what's happening to the Second World War and all these meaningless allegations. This international gang of villains assaulting Baghdad with hundreds of missiles and stealth bombers. The number of the injured civilians, men, women, and children in their houses where their houses have been hit. The number of the wounded until an hour ago, and I've been in touch with the Minister for Health. He told me that the number of the injured is 207 in hospital, in 5 different hospitals in the capital, and we invite you, we have arranged transport for you to go and visit these so-called military positions, 207 military positions. Those innocent people being called by that war criminal Rumsfeld, who claimed that he directed his missiles to military targets. We will be showing you 207 military targets at the hospital now. You're welcome. So the world through you can see that there is no cure to these gangs, but to tell the world the truth. This is a gang of villains, of outcasts, representatives of the ugly American imperialism. These are the representatives of the new wave of imperialism. They lie day and night, and they're not ashamed of anything. God willing, by showing the truth, I'm forced to call them these names because this is the least I can describe them with. They are not ordinary, decent human people. They are criminals. That's their nature. Means they're abnormal, and their conduct, this country of outlaws, the United States prepares its politicians to become criminals. This empire of evil, the evil empire, prepares its people to become war criminals. These the institutions in this outlaw of a country prepares its politicians to become criminals.
The Iraqi information minister is obviously, you know, there is some information in this, and there is some railing against the United States, the criminals, as he called them. He named General Myers by name, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld by name. This gang of criminals, their cowardly assault, he says at one point. A couple of points that we would just underscore here. First and foremost, the Iraqis will now claim, and there's no way to verify this one way or another, and we don't, we'll just wait and see how it plays out. The 207 civilians are in hospitals. He said, well, he said to the reporters, we'll take you to the hospitals and show them, and so we'll see what happens. He said at one point that 5 Iraqi tanks had knocked out 5 U.S. tanks. There's no way to verify that. He said, when talking about this parade of prisoners, of POWs or soldiers who surrendered, he said that they were in fact hijacked civilians made to look like soldiers, that the cowards, referring to the Americans and the British, were so desperate to show achievement that that's what they did. He said that antiquities, great treasures of the country of Iraq had been destroyed in the attack. Is any of what he said truthful? Don't know. Well, all of this needs to be reported on. What matters here is this, it is the first statement of any detail that the government has made since the attack last night. yesterday afternoon here in the States, the first detailed statement, and it gives you a sense of how the Iraqi government wants to pressure the United States. The Iraqis will go to great lengths to try and create an environment where the United States, the British forces, feel compelled to stop shooting, either by pressure in the international community or pressure domestically. And at the same time, that is not to say that innocent people did not die yesterday. I mean, we talked about the great precision of these weapons, but I think it was John Burns several hours ago, who's the correspondent in Baghdad for the New York Times, says the people who were in those buildings, very possibly, even if they were the intended targets, may have been the security guards and the custodians and who knows who else.